Before the United States was even a dream, before the American Revolution or the idea of independence took hold, there was another war that set everything in motion, the French and Indian War. Fought between 1754 and 1763, it was a struggle for control of North America between two great European powers, Britain and France. But the war was more than just a clash of empires. It was a fight that involved countless Native American nations, changed borders forever, and planted the first seeds of rebellion that would later grow into the American Revolution. It was a war that shaped the future of America, in blood, fire, and opportunity. In the mid-1700s, North America was a continent divided among empires. The French claimed vast lands stretching from Canada down through the Mississippi Valley to Louisiana. The British colonies hugged the Atlantic coast, growing quickly in number and population. Between them lay the Ohio River Valley, rich, fertile, and strategically important. To the Native American tribes who lived there, like the Shawnee, Seneca, and Delaware, this land had been home for generations. They traded with both the French and the English, but also fought hard to keep their independence. When both European powers began claiming the same land, tension rose like storm clouds waiting to break. The spark came in 1754, in the woods of western Pennsylvania. A young, ambitious Virginian officer named George Washington led a small British force into the wilderness to warn the French to leave. He was only 22 years old, but his actions would echo far beyond his years. Washington and his men encountered a French scouting party. Shots were fired, and a French officer named Jumonville was killed. That brief skirmish set off a chain of events that would erupt into a full-scale war, not only in America, but across the world. In Europe, it was called the 7 Years' War, but in the colonies, it would forever be remembered as the French and Indian War. At first, things did not go well for the British. The French had fewer soldiers, but they had strong alliances with many Native American tribes, who knew the forests and rivers far better than any European. The native warriors fought with speed and stealth, ambushing British troops who struggled to adapt to this new kind of warfare. One of the earliest disasters came in 1755, when British General Edward Braddock led a large force to capture Fort Duquesne, a key French outpost where modern Pittsburgh now stands. George Washington rode beside him as an aide. The march through the dense woods was slow and dangerous. Suddenly, French and native forces attacked from the trees, invisible and deadly. Braddock's redcoats were thrown into chaos. More than half were killed or wounded, and Braddock himself was fatally shot. Washington barely escaped alive, showing remarkable courage under fire. Though defeated, he earned respect that would later follow him all the way to the presidency. While the British reeled from their losses, the French seemed to dominate. They controlled a chain of forts stretching from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. Their native allies struck fear into the frontier settlements, burning homes and capturing prisoners. Many British colonists wondered if they would ever be safe again. But the tide of war began to turn when a new British leader, William Pitt, came to power in 1757. Pitt believed that North America was the key to global victory. He poured money, supplies, and troops into the colonies, determined to crush the French presence once and for all. By 1758, massive British armies began moving northward and westward. Fort after fort fell. Fort Louisbourg on Cape Breton Island was captured, opening the way to the St. Lawrence River. Fort Duquesne, once the pride of the French frontier, was taken and renamed Fort Pitt, the future site of Pittsburgh. The British Navy controlled the seas, cutting off French reinforcements. The war's climax came in 1759, in a dramatic battle that would decide the fate of an entire continent, the Battle of Quebec. On a September morning, British General James Wolfe led his troops up the steep cliffs outside the city of Quebec to face French forces under General Louis-Joseph de Montcalm. The two armies clashed on the Plains of Abraham in one of the most famous battles in North American history. The fighting was fierce but brief. Both Wolfe and Montcalm were mortally wounded, but by the end of the day, the British had captured Quebec. The victory was a crushing blow to France's hopes in the New World. Within a year, Montreal also fell, and the war in North America was effectively over. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 officially ended the French and Indian War and redrew the map of the continent. France surrendered almost all its territories in North America. Canada and everything east of the Mississippi River went to Britain, while Spain, France's ally, ceded Florida to the British, but received Louisiana in return. For the first time, Britain stood as the dominant power in North America. The dream of a French empire on the continent had vanished, but victory came at a cost. The war had nearly bankrupted Britain. Supplying troops and fighting across an ocean drained the treasury. The British government began looking for ways to recover the money, and they decided the American colonists should help pay the bill. After all, the war had been fought to protect them, or so London argued. New taxes and trade restrictions were introduced. The Sugar Act, the Stamp Act, and others soon followed. To the colonists, these laws felt unfair and oppressive. They had fought and died alongside British soldiers, yet now they were being taxed without representation. The resentment that began after the French and Indian War would soon grow into open rebellion. Meanwhile, the Native Americans found themselves in a desperate situation. During the war, many tribes had allied with the French because they believed the French were less threatening to their land. The British victory destroyed that balance. Now, with no French power left to check British expansion, settlers pushed westward into native territories. This led to a new wave of resistance, most famously led by an Ottawa chief named Pontiac. In 1763, Pontiac and his allies attacked British forts and settlements across the Great Lakes region in a conflict known as Pontiac's Rebellion. Hundreds were killed on both sides, and British officials were forced to issue the Proclamation of 1763, forbidding colonists from settling west of the Appalachian Mountains. But few settlers obeyed. The frontier moved forward, and so did the tension. The French and Indian War also changed how the colonists saw themselves. Before the war, most people in the British colonies still thought of themselves as loyal Englishmen. But after years of fighting, they had developed a new sense of identity. Colonial militias had fought bravely without constant British command. Men like George Washington and others proved that the colonists could lead and fight on their own. They began to see the British regulars not as protectors, but as arrogant outsiders who looked down on them. The unity formed during the war, when colonies had to cooperate for survival, planted the first seeds of an American nation. For the native tribes, however, the outcome was tragic. The war disrupted their lands, destroyed alliances, and shifted power in ways they could not control. The British no longer needed to court native friendship as the French once had. Policies became harsher and respect faded. Native nations that had once balanced two empires now faced one unstoppable wave of colonial expansion. Within a generation, their worlds would be changed forever. The war also left deep marks on culture and society. It was the first time news from distant battles traveled through newspapers and letters, connecting colonies from Georgia to Massachusetts in a shared awareness of events. Merchants, farmers, and soldiers all realized they were part of something larger, a continent-wide struggle. The British Crown may have won the war, but the people of the colonies had discovered their own strength. In Europe, the victory gave Britain vast territories, but also created new enemies. France, humiliated and eager for revenge, would later return to play a decisive role, this time helping the American colonies during their revolution. Without the French and Indian War, that alliance might never have happened. In a way, the same conflict that pushed Britain to dominate North America also laid the groundwork for its eventual loss of it. By the end of the 1760s, the effects of the war were visible everywhere. The British Army still garrisoned forts across the colonies. The national debt had doubled. Taxes were higher than ever. The colonists' frustration grew with every new policy from London. Pamphlets, protests, and boycotts became common. The idea of liberty, once abstract, began to take real shape. The same men who had fought under the British flag, Washington, Adams, Franklin, now questioned whether that flag still represented their future. So when the first shots of the American Revolution rang out 20 years later, they were not the beginning of a story. They were the echo of one that had started long before, in the forests of the Ohio Valley, with young George Washington and a war between two empires. The French and Indian War had changed everything. It united the colonies in spirit, trained a generation of leaders, weakened Britain's hold, and inspired a desire for freedom that could not be contained. Looking back, the French and Indian War was more than just a chapter in colonial history. It was the moment America began to take shape, forged in the smoke of muskets, the clash of cultures, and the ambition of empires. It showed how global power struggles could transform distant colonies into the foundation of a new nation.